if I want it. What a beautiful expression of something that never, ever happened to me before. This says I'm going to write about the kind of guy I want to be. And then in partnership with my higher power, I'm going to walk toward that. I'm going to walk toward that as an ideal. That never happened to me in therapy. Therapy was great for what it did, but it never worked for that. There was no partnering. There was no ideal. And here I'm told to express the ideal, and in partnership with my higher power, I'm going to grow toward that and get freer and freer and see what can happen. So that's the 6 and 7 that I was guided to do with the 3 sections of my inventory. I did that 6 and 7, which has become really the focal point, the axis of my relationship with God. My 6 and 7 step has done more to enrich my life and broaden my life than any of the other steps, because 6 and 7 is the trip back to all the steps, which is what I'm going to talk about in 10. I went to do 8 and 9, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know I was going to make amends to my dad. He was dead, and I could not do a lot of the stuff that I heard people doing in AA. I couldn't go to the grave and talk to him, and I couldn't write a letter. And again, I don't indict anybody who does. I have sponsored plenty of men who have written a letter, who have gone to the grave and gotten relief. I couldn't, which terrified me, because I said, how's this going to happen? What's going to happen to me? I'm never going to be free of this. And it would come up just like a black hole, you know? And I was resentful at myself for being loaded the night my father died. What are the defects? I was ashamed. I wasn't living in today. I was irresponsible. I had low self-esteem. I wasn't trusting in God. I was a grudge holder against myself, unwilling to accept the fact that I was spiritually sick. And you know what? I had unreasonable expectations. I was a junkie. What would I expect? What do I expect? What do I expect to act like? What am I supposed to act like? You know, I acted exactly like I was supposed to act, like a hopeless junkie whose father was in between me and the drink, and you know what's going to happen then. He's going to disappear. And I didn't know what I was going to do about it. I didn't know what I was going to do about my wife. I didn't know what I was going to do about my children. I told you about the terrible condition that they were in when I came to AA. And Nancy was very sick from prolonged exposure to me. And my sponsor, I was really blessed. I had a sponsor who refused to tell me how to make amends. And I know that some sponsors are instructive with people about how to make amends. And again, I don't indict that. It was very fortunate for me that I had a guy who just wasn't willing to tell me. Now, I don't know if he just did that for me or if he did it for everybody, but he did it for me. I said, Don, what am I going to do? He said, Scott, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what you're going to have to do to get free of this. I had an 8-step list with names, and he said, every time you make amends, cross one out. If you run into somebody that wasn't on the list that you owe an amends to, go home, put them on a list, cross it out, just so you knew you did the right thing, you know. He said, do your job in Alcoholics Anonymous. What am I going to do about the boys? Scott, I don't know. What am I going to do about Nancy? I don't know. Do your job in AA. Take a look at the inventory and appreciate and address the inventory as your job, your spiritual job. And that's what I started to do. And I've been sober for a couple of years, and I was online to buy lunch at work, and there was a guy in front of me at line. Actually, I was sober. I was like in my first year. And the guy in front of me online was like buying a can of Colt 45 with, like, you know, loose change and lint and a half-eaten milk dud. You know the guy. He turned around and looked at me, and instead of in my best Bronx saying, what are you looking at? I said, how you doing? He said, you don't know how I'm doing. No one knows how I'm doing except for the people in AA. So we went outside, we had a talk. And I went on my first 12-step call that night. I called a guy with more time than me because I knew enough to do that. And we were told by some people to take the guy down to County General, lovely County USC Hospital, and dump him off at the door. Don't go in. Don't show them that he has any resources so they'll take him as a patient. I don't know why. We didn't listen to him. We went through the whole process with the guy. About halfway through being checked in, he turns to the guy I'm with, the guy with some time, and he says, I feel like I'm dying. And the guy I'm with says to him, that's because you are. And I said, oh, no. I pulled him aside. I said, how could you say that to the guy? I'm scared he's not going to like us, you know? How could you say that? What a cold, insensitive thing. What is he supposed to say to the guy? The guy's in a county facility. He's lying, saying he's got blood in his urine to break his way into the alcoholic ward. What is the guy supposed to say? It's just a bad day. Just having a bad day. This isn't a bad day. This is what dying feels like. I'll let you know when you're having a bad day. This isn't it. But you will see men and women come into AA if you stay here for any appreciable amount of time, again, with bottoms that will make your hair stand on end. You will look at that man or woman, they'll say, well, they're done. They're obviously done. There's no way in God's green earth they could ever drink again. And after some amount of time, if they don't treat their illness with a program of action outlined in our book, it has been my experience that it will not be their bottom after a while. It will be a period of time where people were thinking behind their back, talking behind their back, and they will move on with the business of dying. And it is an incredible thing to watch that mechanism. You can watch them grow toxic. I can't let a newcomer know what it's like to, at times, feel free of resentment. They have no relative experience with that. I can't tell them that a lot of the time I'm resentment-free, and when I get a resentment, it's such a distinct departure from the way I'm used to feeling that I feel as if my appendix has burst and I've gone toxic. There's no way that I can really let a person know that. That's a bizarre concept. And I had virtually no relative experience to understand that. So, a couple of years after this, I was sponsoring a guy, and this was in the early days of HIV and AIDS, and very little was known about it. At any rate, I sponsored this guy for a short period of time, and after a while, he called me up. He said, look, if you can fit it into your busy schedule, why don't you drop dead? Get off my back. I don't want to hear about this book crap, this God crap. Take a hike till your hair floats. Leave me alone. And he ripped some people off in the program. He stole some money. He ripped off an apartment. He stole a car. God, stole a car. And I'm judging this guy. I'm not making an evaluation. I'm making it a judgment. I like that little loophole. Not a judgment and an evaluation. Feel free to use that. Because for me, without 10, there is no 12. Because I will get pissed off at the men that I sponsor. There's just no question about it. So I went to my sponsor. I told him about it, and he's, I'm resentful at PJ for ripping people off in AA and making me look bad. It affects my self-esteem, pocketbook, ambition, personal relations. What are the defects? I'm self-centered. I'm making this is about me. I'm a people pleaser. I care more about how I'm seen in AA than what this guy's going through. I have spiritual pride. Again, how dare he comport himself thusly after coming into contact with someone of my spiritual caliber. I'm not living in today. I'm putting him down for stealing a car. A man lent me a car and I sold it. So maybe hypocrisy needed to be on the list. And I wrote about it, and I kept my mouth shut. And sometime after this, when this guy found out that he was sick, he couldn't call anyone else. He called the county institution. They said, all we can do is take you to county general and dump you off of the door. I knew that wasn't true because I had gone through it. He couldn't call anybody else because the other people had told him what they had thought of him, had been burnt out. I was the only guy left he could call. And I got to be there. And this was at a time when everyone was so scared, like you'd become HIV through sweat. And I'd kiss him and his sweat would get on my lips. And I knew I was going to be okay. I'd wash my lips. I was scared. And I'd write about it. I'd read it to my sponsor. I'd pray. And I got to be there for this guy. And I got to kiss him and hold him when I couldn't kiss Davy Redman. And my father came back into my life. Not in a flash, not an event, not that afternoon, but I found out that I could talk about him. I found that I didn't have a picture of him in the house. I wanted a picture. This happened over a period of time. My sons didn't know him because I was too scared to talk about him. I realized I had ripped my son's grandfather out of their life. So I made a point, and it wasn't hard for me to do because I was feeling it, that I could tell him funny stories. He's a pisser, my father. I could tell him stories about... And my sons started developing a relationship with their grandfather. A couple of years ago, my sons had a horrible thing happen. They're very gifted musicians, and a very beloved friend of theirs at 19 years old passed away suddenly and unexpectedly in the middle of the night from a physical malady that nobody knew he had. 19-year-old kid. And my son Micah came to me and he said, Dad, what am I going to do? And I told him what you told me. I said, son, I got to do three things. I got to make sure there's no resentment blocking me from the person who's gone. I got to make sure to not end the relationship just because they've carried their light into another room. And I got to make sure not to be an opportunist, not to use this death for my own self-pity and to get a leg up. Where did those ideas come from? And I sat in that shul and with my arms around my sons and felt the presence of my Father as powerfully as I've ever felt it in my life. Because of addressing his death, of approaching 6 and 7, of leveraging that to bring God to bear in my life and getting that kind of freedom. I'm going to talk about my marriage and my sons. You told Nancy and I not to get involved in our first year, and we didn't. We didn't go near each other. I mean, we didn't even talk to each other. We were so broken. We were just completely psycho. I was talking to somebody earlier. I haven't remembered this in quite a while, but I will now teach you the Scott Redman couples workshop in 2 seconds. It'll just take 2 seconds. My idea of working on a relationship is to talk to you until you change your mind. Is to talk to you until your eyes roll back in your head and you keel over, and on the way down you go, oh, okay. So that's what I'm bringing to the party. That's the magic I'm bringing. I don't know how to fight. I have no idea how to fight. I either scream until my wife shuts up, or I cry until she shuts up. Either one's fine. The tyranny of helplessness is fine. I have no problem with that at all. So I'm either screaming or and I like to loom. I'm a loomer. I like to loom with a light behind me and get her in the shadow. It's like total eclipse of the Jew. I like to get her right in there. And if I can work like a scream, a cry, and a loom into one fight, that's a trifecta. It doesn't get a whole lot better than that. So these are my skills. These are my fighting skills. And I'm either screaming and retaliating, or I'm repressing and eventually climb up into a clock tower with a high-powered rifle and carry the message that way. I got no skills at all. I can't. I mean, I'm so sick. I can't even clean my house. Can't even clean my house. I'm standing next to 10 men, 10 years younger than me, my whole life, and I'm saying, I wonder what it feels like to be a grown-up. What a crappy way to live. You're $1 short and a day late every day. You're never in your life. You're going to start having a life when X, Y, and Z happens. I never felt like a grown man until I came into AA and started doing this work, because I wasn't doing what grown men do. Grown men clean up after themselves. It's been my experience. Grown men make their bed. That's what grown men do. But I can't even do that. I think somewhere in the back of my twisted mind that a certain amount of housework should equal a certain amount of sex. That there should be like conversion tables on the back of cleaning products of housework to sex. I wish I was lying. And so I'm doing the housework, and I'm going to my wife, I'm finished. And she's saying, yeah, really finished. More than you could possibly know. So I had to start doing that work, and we were just broken, and I'd write resentment after resentment against my wife. I'm resentful at Nancy for not being sexually available. It affects my self-esteem, pocketbook, ambition, personal relations, and sex. What are the defects of character? Lust. No, really. Lust. Now, lust is an interesting defect. It's kind of like gluttony. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have sex, but the minute that I attach power to sex, it becomes lust. There's nothing wrong with being hungry, then maybe some defects are getting anchored to the natural feeling of being hunger, and you could call it gluttony. Maybe. Okay. So, I got these problems, and they're really bleeding into my sobriety. They're moving forward, and my home life is smashed. I mean, we have these insane rules in our house. My kids are not allowed to eat sugar, watch TV, or curse. That's the rules in my house. But Dad's being carted away by the paramedics for overdoses. And so here's your granola. Now get into the car with Dr. Death. You know, and my wife's going, hope you live. And the kids are going off with me. I mean, it's completely psycho. Absolutely psycho. But you can't control what's in the middle, so you just try to make the rotten skeleton of a turkey with nice cranberries and everything around it. So my wife reached out to the Al-Anon family groups, which I'm just so grateful for. I don't need my wife to be an Al-Anon, but I sure do enjoy it. And she got this incredible sponsor named Ruby, who she still has. And Ruby, the boys would come over, and Ruby would give them a big bowl of M&Ms and sit them down in front of a TV and put on the Love Boat, you know. And Nancy would go, ah! And Ruby would say, stop helping your kids. You're killing them. Stop helping them. And you'll forgive one bad word I'm going to say. One day Milton called the boys over. And Milton was Ruby's husband. He was sober 20 years. And he called them over and he bent down. He said, boys, your parents don't know shit. And they went, oh my God, we suspected, but it's been confirmed. And it's like, they just went nuts. First of all, he cursed, which was like huge to see a grown-up curse who didn't have a needle in their arm. And it was, you know what? It was light and polite. We had to get lightened up. We needed you to pry open our jaws and spit life back into us, and that's exactly what you did. You know, Ruby has given my sons $5 on their birthday, their whole lives. They're 20 and 23. They still get their $5. They love Ruby. They love her, you know. One day I came home, and Ruby is just a service gal, and I came home and my wife had a bolt of gingham and a bunch of ticking, and she was stuffing gingham swans. And I said, oh, the arts and crafts have begun. This is my nightmare, that we're going to hook a rug. You know, I knew that this was going to happen. You get a big book and a loom. You know, I knew somewhere. You know those women who wear jewelry that look like from like Micronesian nut-gathering tribes? You know, these are the kind of Jewish women I grew up with, so I know that that's where we're headed, you know. And I just was like, part of me just went, oh, no. And Al-Anons, when they have a function, their centerpieces are like Rose Bowl floats. They're like, you know, they're mechanized. They have water fountains. I mean, they get very, very busy. Very busy. And the funny thing is now when Nancy wants to let me know that a newcomer's getting it, she always says to me she's stuffing swans. She's stuffing swans down. It's our little shorthand. It really was incredible. And at about 5 years of sobriety, I was driving home. I had a dream job for me. I was directing TV shows at Universal, and I just want to tell you that I got this job. I was over in the lot, and this Grip is one of the guys on a movie set who just makes sure everything is right for the shot. And he walked up and he said, oh, you're that caterer. You're that sweet caterer. What are you doing on the lot? And I said, I'm directing the show on stage 46. He said, did you go right from the catering to the directing? Did you go? And this first show I directed, they brought a guy in to be the assistant director. And he walked in and I looked up and I saw his eyes. He went, the caterer. Oh, no. This is one of these kids that have been screaming at me, and I didn't have to get even with him, but I really enjoyed that little shudder that went through his body. I like that. I was driving home, had a great job, driving a new car. 5 years sober, things are moving forward, and I realized while I was driving home that I was scared to go home. I was scared of my wife. And that realization really terrified me. And I started realizing that when my wife came home, I was looking around the house like, are the kids watching the right thing on TV? Is everything cleaned up? Is everything okay? Very much like dealing with untreated alcoholism. Is everything okay? And I realized I was terrified of her. And I sat down and I wrote the resentment against my wife, wrote the resentment against myself for being scared. And I did 6 and 7, and what came out in the wash when I did my 6 and 7 step is that the message to me about my defects was really clear. It didn't say retaliate. It didn't say repress. It said overcome a fear of confrontation and tell her how you feel without telling her what to do. Fear of confrontation. Fear of confrontation is not repressing. It's not retaliating. It's overcoming a fear of confrontation, telling somebody how I feel without telling them what to do. And I learned it from my sons. And I'll tell you how. I was... when am I supposed to stop? 2:20. I was in my first year of sobriety, and I was making my son's lunch. And I said to Micah, what do you want on your hot dog? And he said, I want mustard, onions, and lettuce. And I said, lettuce? And he said, oh, okay, I don't want lettuce. And he walked away, and he came back about 45 minutes later, and he looked me directly in the eyes, and I'm not altering one syllable. He said, I will never again allow your opinion of what I want affect what I ask for. So I asked him to sponsor me at that point, see if I could get a little help. And what's that? Where the hell does that come from? Sometime after that, Jesse, the little boy, he broke his wrist in a growth plane. And if you know the way kids develop, a growth plane is cartilage which is going to turn to bone. And if it gets disrupted, it's very important that once it's set, it gets left alone, because if it's disrupted improperly, it's not going to grow back right. So I took him to the hospital, got him fixed up, schoolyard accident, comes back. He and his brother are beating the crap out of each other in 10 minutes. Because, you know, the cast is a weapon. You know, the cast is not a medical thing. It's a weapon. And for a younger brother, it's not a bad weapon to boot. So I told Micah that this could not go on. He couldn't do it. And he did it again. And it was one of those things where I did what you guys have done for me. What has Alcoholics Anonymous given me as a result of the steps and a result of the inventory process? Bill said it on an organization level. When the trustees would push for more rules, he would always say to them, they don't need rules. They've got alcoholism. They have alcoholism. Believe me, alcoholism will school them. Alcoholism will rein them in. They don't need the rules. And of course, he was so right. And I have found that to be true in my life. That I have alcoholism. That if I walk the line, that if I stay on top of it, that if I ask God to present Himself in my life and I do that work, it's going to do it for me. And I got sensible, consistent, flexible limits. Sensible, consistent, flexible limits. What an incredible idea. The guys that I know in AA who I've asked for help have done that for me. They don't write things in stone. If they do, they got a eraser. The guys who I hang out with in Alcoholics Anonymous are seekers, are changers. So I got in my son's face and I let him know that he could not do this. He couldn't do it. This is not something I could repeat 11 times. If this thing got disrupted, we were in real big trouble here. And I screamed at him. I yelled at him. I said, can't repeat it. That's it. Walked away from me, slammed his door. He slammed the door. Slammed that door. So now I got the dad tick going, you know. He slammed the door. So I go to the door and I open the door. And before I can unload on him, he looks at me and he says, hold it. I didn't say you were wrong out there. You were right. But a big guy just got in my face and screamed and yelled. I'm not saying you're wrong. Don't tell me I can't be angry. What's that? What the hell is that? That's overcoming a fear of confrontation and telling somebody what you need without, or how you feel without telling them what to do. An expression of a feeling without playing God. Because I got to quit playing God, and my kid taught it to me. What a beautiful demonstration of it. You were right, Dad. I shouldn't do that. Don't tell me I can't be pissed off. You're scary and large. True. And what a blessing, because for me, the model of parenting, the model in relationships for me has really been a result of that kind of sponsorship. I've really modeled one for the other. They've fed one another. You know, it's an incredible thing. You know, you don't have to. You can get a designer sponsor here. You can get anybody you want. Doesn't matter. If you don't allow yourself to be sponsored, it does not matter. You know, who you. There are people who tell them that say I'm their sponsor. This is my favorite. A guy walks up to me in a meeting years ago, and he says, "You know what? You really haven't been there for me. I'm going to have to move on. I just want to thank you, but I got to cut loose." I had no recollection of sponsoring the guy. No recollection of ever being asked. No recollection of ever agreeing to sponsor the guy. The guy was the kind of, he was an incredible blowhard who, when he would share, people would take their own life. So I missed, I was so grateful to be fired by this guy, and I had never sponsored, you know, I missed the whole thing. It was great. I have a friend of mine who a lot of people here know, who he was at a meeting one time. He speaks a lot. And this guy walked up to him after he finished his talk, and this guy walked up to him and said, "You look really familiar." And my friend put my arm around him and said, "That's because I'm your sponsor." And what had happened was, the guy, when he was new, about 8 months before, had been to a meeting where my buddy was talking and got very excited about the talk and ran up to him and asked him to sponsor him. And he said, yeah, never called him again. So that's why he looked so familiar. He was, in fact, the guy's sponsor. So I really like that a lot. So that's been an incredibly powerful example that my sons have given me. Overcoming a fear of confrontation and telling somebody how I feel without telling them what to do. So I did my inventory. I sat down with Nancy and I said, I'm scared of you. I need to have an open and honest conversation with you. What do you mean you're scared of me? I don't know. I'm scared of you. I'm still running around trying to do this. Well, you do this and you do that. So I'm not arguing with you. I think that's true, but I'm scared. Well, what do you want me to do about it? Nothing. I'm scared. I threw it on the table, and by throwing it on the table, I started the process of being able to take a look at it and being able to take action on it, and then, and then I went over the top and started saying, I'm scared you're not going to do what I'm telling you to do. Personal problem. But we really started making some progress then. And then we went and we continued to argue, continued to fight. And we started trying to have a better quality of fight. We stopped screaming, stopped crying, cut back on the looming. And we tried to really have, and my wife was incredible at it. And this is how she taught me how to do it. My sons would start fighting, physically fighting. And I would, because of my incredible guilt about being a lousy father, I'd pull them apart and think that I was helping them. And Nancy would say, you never let them finish. We don't finish. No one here finishes. How many times have I said to myself, how did we wind up here again? We always wind up back here. It's like we never move. We never get any movement. And what my wife was pointing out to me was, because you're not finishing. And we'd start to fight, and I'd get louder and louder, and she'd go, okay. And then just stay on it and talk about it and keep putting it out there, And if the alcoholic, if you talk to them and ask why they've done it again, and if they stick with you and they're honest and you're not angry and you're not accusing, odds are they have no more idea than you. And a meeting can start taking place, a real relationship, a real meeting. And I started letting my kids finish fights, and I want to tell you, it was like someone ripped something out of my body. I used to sit on my hands. And Nancy would say, trust them, let them do this. And they did it. And they have an incredible relationship today. Absolutely remarkable relationship, And we would continue to have these explosions, and then our sexual relationship would diminish, and then I'd feel punished, and she'd feel something, whatever I decided she was feeling because of my mind reading skills, and I'd have to go back and do sexual inventories. And what should I be doing instead? What I should be doing instead is be grateful to be available. Be grateful to be available. What an incredible idea. In the old days, if I'm available, then it's on. Even if I'm alone. Doesn't matter. It's lonely, but, And the results are very unsatisfying for me. Just to be grateful to be available, to not be loaded on coke, to not have to drink, just to be available, to be loving, to be caring, and to find some other way to express it. What a remarkable gift. What should I be doing instead? Have an open and honest conversation with my wife. Now, when I used to express my feelings, I wasn't expressing feelings. I was giving you a list of things to do, because you've got to do something about each one of my feelings, all right? But to really express my feelings and to have somebody else express their feelings, that started being incredibly productive. And we continued to fight. And we go to therapy. And now we're in therapy. And we work out great things in therapy. And then go home and throw a Buick at each other. And what was happening is the same thing that happened to me in therapy before I got sober. I was uncovering, discovering, and I wasn't applying. It was a straight line between us and the therapist. And there was no spiritual element. There was no moral application, moral psychology. I'm an alcoholic. I don't get movement without the moral application. I just don't. And again, I've used therapy for many things in sobriety, very effectively. I had to go into therapy when I was leaving my first sponsor. I had to leave my first sponsor for a lot of reasons, and it was unbelievably hard. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in AA, besides stop drinking, that damn not drinking stuff. And I went to a therapist who was extremely helpful to me. But it wouldn't have been successful had I not reached out to members of Alcoholics Anonymous and gotten the help that I needed. And so what my sponsor kept saying to me was, the longest trip in your life might be the 3 feet to the other side of the bed. That could be the longest trip that you have in your life. How are you going to do that? How are you going to step from the boat to the shore? How are you going to make that journey across? And that, in your life, that might not be the journey across the bed. It might be the journey across the table. It might be the journey across the phone. I don't know what it is for you in your life, but I know that the journey is possible. And I know for me, it was informed. You see, I get understanding in therapy. I get forgiveness in Alcoholics Anonymous. Understanding myself is very, very helpful, but it is not a solution to my problem. Self-knowledge availed me nothing. Information about you in the end result availed me nothing. I get understanding in therapy, which is, again, a good thing. But without forgiveness, it's nothing. So, and Paul would say, he would tell me how he and Max prayed together. They prayed together. They loved to pray together. And I would think, how nice for you. That's what newcomers say to me sometimes. I love that when a new guy says, I'm so happy for you, which usually means, I hope your face burst into flame. Usually it means I'm happy for you because it's not going to happen for me. And take a hike, leave me alone. Sometimes it means that. And we were in this bizarre situation of loving each other and valuing each other and being in a position of being tremendous help to a lot of other people and not being able to show that simple love and understanding and kindness to each other. How crazy is that? You know what? If I'm living with the enemy, I ought to move. Eventually, And out of desperation, out of facing divorce in sobriety, I'm not supposed to be experiencing this. I'm now 6, 7 years sober. I'm down the line. I'm sober. I'm sponsoring lots of guys. I'm active in my home group. I'm talking in AA. This isn't supposed to happen to me. Who is it supposed to happen to? To human beings. And it's happening to me, and I'm terrified of my wife, and we're not getting anywhere, and we keep coming on, and we're developing tools, but we don't have a moral application for them. And finally, out of desperation, as I said, I will get on my knees in the middle of Grand Central Station with a known felonious puppy strangling guy who I know for 2 seconds. Sure, let's do the third step. Let's go. But pray with my wife? That's embarrassing and unnecessary. And if you're a puppy strangler and you're new, welcome. We got a guy who's strangled 2 puppies, I guarantee you. And Nancy and I finally started holding hands, and we started not working the steps together. We started saying, please, Pop, please help us. Can you help us to have a sense of humor? Can you help us to stop taking everything personally? Everything personally. Can you please help us keep it light and polite? Can you please help me remember that this is my wife, my lover, my buddy, my bride. This is my confidant. This is my friend. This is not my adversary. Can you please help me? One day Nancy, and we really got so much success in this. One day Nancy said, oh, please, Pop, help us, despite the fact that that I'm a wet blanket and he's a windbag. And it was said in such a beautiful way that I said, help me do whatever my wife tells me to do. Ah! And but we'll say stuff like that. We'll say stuff like that. And it's been an incredibly productive thing as a result of going back. What should I be doing instead? That's been a real focal point of that sexual inventory for me. What should I be doing instead? Tell your wife you're scared of her. Have an open and honest conversation. Go to therapy together. Pray together. Whatever that's been. So, anyway, it's time to take a break, and I don't have to go to the bathroom. So, I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Let's move further into step 10 now. If you take a look at the, some of you have this throwaway. I printed up some people might appreciate this and some people might have absolutely no use for it. I just wanted to share with you the beginning of my morning regimen of prayer. I say, I am powerless. My life is unmanageable. I know that you will restore me to sanity. I turn my will and my life over to you. That's the first 3 steps. And then I say the 3rd step prayer. And then I say the 7th step prayer. And if there are things that a friend of mine and I before were talking about, repeating the same kinds of behavior and over again, repeating the same kind of resentments coming up. And what I like to do is, let's say I have a problem with my boss, and there's certain defects on that appear every time. That I'm self-centered, I have unreasonable expectations, I fear confrontation, self-pity, self-centered. He treats everybody like crap, not just me. Whatever the thing is, that when I say my 7-step prayer in the morning, I can have a little extra time with my higher power and say, you know what? I'm going to go in, I'm going to see him this morning. What should I do? I need to get rid of the self-centeredness in this area. What should I do? And sometimes the inner voice would say, stay away from him. Sometimes the inner voice would say, go in and make him coffee. There's no hard and fast rules about it. I talked briefly before about that kind of spirit in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you study the history of AA, one thing is really clear. There was nobody was saying this is the way it gets done. These guys were wackos. Bill was dropping acid. I mean, read pass it on. There's a whole paragraph. As a matter of fact, he dropped so much acid that some guys had to go, Bill, stop. You're playing with a headless doll under a black light. Stop it already. He started eating niacin and preaching niacin. I mean, they would stay up at night and play with a Ouija board. My point here is that they were real seekers. And the people that I've hung out with and get most from in AA are seekers and people who stay spiritually pliant and inclusive. And because of that, I've been, my sponsors have had an opportunity to grow me up spiritually. And it's really been wonderful. And then what I did was I went through the section on Step 11 in Chapter 6, and I sort of made a list of all the things that I'm kind of instructed to ask God for. Father, please direct my thinking today. Show me all through the day what my next step is to be. Give me whatever I might need to overcome such difficulties. Please keep my thoughts especially divorced from selfish, dishonest, and self-seeking motives. Please keep me from self-will and self-pity. Hold me close to you. Reveal your work to me and give me the power to carry it out. Hold me close to you and keep me sober just for today so that I may better do thy will. Thy will be done, not mine. And now I open up to God, ask what's in store, discuss what's current, pray openly and honestly, have a real, breathing, living relationship with my higher power so that in all matters I can turn to the Father of light who presides over all. It's a wonderful quote that I just love. I'm going to jump forward 2 sheets ahead. It's in huge print. And it was an expression from a spiritual teacher that just captured me, and I wanted to share it with you. Because if I don't do that morning dedication, if I don't do the 10th step, if I don't allow that to bridge me over to the 12th step, this is such a beautiful expression of what happens when people walk away from AA. God does not die on the day that I cease to believe in a personal deity. But I die on the day when my life ceases to be illumined by the steady radiance renewed daily of a wonder the source of which is beyond all reason. What a gorgeous expression of what happens in AA for me. I was talking briefly before with a woman who's sponsoring somebody who just went out. And what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? For me, without the 10th step, there is no 12th step. There just isn't. And that has been my experience as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. One of my favorite people in AA was a guy named Howard Cooper. He died with 22 years of sobriety. He was an incredible guy, and he was a Skid Row bum. And a gentleman, a gentle man. He was thrown out of the Harbor Lights in L.A. a number of times, and I want to tell you, to get thrown out of Skid Row Harbor Lights, which is Salvation Army, you got to really be an overachiever. And Howard got sober, and in his first year, he was asked to go do a 12-step call on a guy named Sullivan downtown in a Skid Row hotel, and he went down with this other guy. And they talked to this guy Sullivan, who subsequently, after that night, drank himself to death. 10 years later, Howard was about 11 years sober at a meeting, and a guy walked up to him after the meeting and said, "You saved my life." And Howard said, I'm sorry, I don't know you. And the guy said, "Well, remember this guy Sullivan?" And he described him, and Howard said, "Yeah, he died." And the guy said, "I was hiding under the bed the night that you 12-stepped Sullivan, and I heard every word that you said, and I never had another drink." You just don't know what you're doing when you do it. You just don't know, One night, Howard was in my home group. He went to drive to Vegas at night, and he got out in the desert, and cop pulls him over. First thing, sees the chase, says, "Son of a," and he gets pulled over, and this cop walks up to the car and says, "Are you a friend of Bill's?" Howard says, "Yeah, what do you mean?" Cop said, "Well, I saw your bumper sticker." He says, "I'm a friend of Bill's too. I like to have a little fellowship at the beginning of my shift. So I just want to..." I hung out for a while, There was this great guy, a member of my home group, another guy who died sober with over 20 years of sobriety. And his name was Bill. He was an English guy. We call him Bill of London. And I'll tell you this story because he loved the story. It's his favorite story, and it's one of my favorite stories about newcomers. This old guy had a 12-step call, and he grabbed the guy with just a couple of weeks to go with him. And they got in the car, drove out to the country, hit a dirt road, out the dirt road, out into the boonies, and they get to where the guy is, and it's not even a house. It's a lean-to with no door. It's got like a burlap flap. And they go in, and there's this helpless, sick drunk just wearing underwear, stained underwear on a stained mattress with nothing on it, and a little candle in a can flickering, and he's sucking on a bottle of wine. And the new guy looks at this guy, and he says, "Look, I'm new here. I don't know that much about this thing. But one thing I know for sure, if you don't stop drinking, you're going to lose all this." And I thought it was like, this is one of the best stories I've ever heard in my life. And the guy, probably went, "Yeah, he's right. Down to my last can here." Without 10, there's no 12. This friend of mine in L.A. was... he was answering phones at central office, and this woman called and said, "How long is the waiting list for AA now?" And he said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, I told my old man he either had to go to AA last week or get the hell out of the house." And he went and he called you, and he came back and he said, "They're full." And but they put me on a waiting list. They're going to give us a call, when something opens up. So I want to just know if there's space available now. And he said to her, "I think you have a long wait. I think it's going to be a long wait." I'm resentful at the men I sponsor quite often. And if I didn't sit down and write... that guy Jay I told you about, the guy with the book before? About a year and a half ago, the pain got so bad that he tied his neck to something on the wall. He couldn't find anything to hang himself from, and he sat down until he was dead. The pain was so unremitting and so horrifying he couldn't bear it anymore, and he had to turn it off. I'm resentful at Jay for drinking and dying. It affects my self-esteem, ambition, and certainly personal relationships. What are the defects? Well, I'm self-centered because part of me is saying, after all I've done for you. I'm playing God. I was resentful at my father for dying. That's a terribly embarrassing thing to have on an inventory, but I was. One of my defects was playing God. I was deciding when people should live or die. And you know what another defect was? Was ungrateful. I had my father till I was 21. I've met a lot of people who've never had their father, never met their father, wished they had never met their father, and certainly not had him all that time. So I have found for me that this process of the 10th step has been the saving grace for me. And I tell you, I would have stopped sponsoring a long time ago. And I've had many resentments against my sponsors. And I've had to sit down and work the 10th step and take a look at what I could do. But what if it doesn't go away? What if it doesn't go away? I'm 10 years sober. I'm up to over 300 pounds. Can't weigh myself anymore because my scale only goes up to 280, and I'm not willing to go down to a freight scale and weigh myself, and that's the only thing I can weigh myself on at that time. What am I going to do? I'm now flying all over the world to AA conferences. I can barely fit into an airplane seat. I'm about to ask for the seatbelt extension, a golden moment in anybody's life, and I have no sex life. I'm completely unavailable. I am the scariest, most awful walk to me in the world is the 20 feet from my seat to the podium to talk to thousands of members of Alcoholics Anonymous because I can't bear being seen. Am I doing good work in AA? Absolutely, no question about it. I stopped smoking in Smokers Anonymous. What does that have to do with sobriety? Absolutely nothing unless you're going through with it. Unless you're going through it, it has absolutely nothing to do with sobriety unless you're going through it. I want to stop smoking. I'm scared. It makes me scared all the time. Every ache I have, every pain I have, I immediately becomes brain cancer. I'm scared. I'm having a hard time breathing, and it's starting to scare my children. I don't know what to do. I finally go to Smokers Anonymous. I want to be in Smokers Anonymous like I want to tap a 10-penny nail into my eye. All right. Now, one of the things I have done to make amends to my wife is I have gone to great extremes to make sure that I am never in a position of compromising myself with women in AA or outside of AA. And it has nothing to do with anybody but me. But I was so off in this area, I have just made sure that I don't sponsor women. This is, I just don't do that stuff. I have great friends, great relationships, and I just make sure it's in a certain framework. One night after I spoke, this woman came up to me and we had a talk. I don't know why. It just seemed like the right thing to do. We had a talk. And afterwards, she came back to me subsequently and said, you saved my life that night. Of course, I saved her life like I saved Jay's life. I have no power at all. But that's what she said. Now, this is the reason why I mention it. I finally go to Smokers Anonymous, and I'm terrified. I'm terrified because I finally have something that's working in my life. I have asked to be relieved of drinking, and you know what? I am. I'm not only relieved of it, I'm helping other people. My family's getting better. We're making a new beginning. It's working. How am I going to ask God for this other thing? How am I going to ask Him for a thing? And I see guys all the time that stop and smoke and they start and they stop. What if I go to God and I ask Him to remove the cigarettes and He doesn't? I'm going to drink again. It's all a house of cards. It's going to come tumbling down. And it's starting to feel like self-help. Let me do this. Let me do that. I like to lose 10 pounds. I want my hair to be a heavy descending hairline. I want, what do I want to do? It's starting to feel off. So I go to Smokers Anonymous meeting, and the woman who told me that I saved her life is taking a cake or whatever they give you, a carton, whatever they give you, for a year off cigarettes, and she gets to the podium and she says, you know what? People in AA who still smoke work shitty programs. So I do a Yosemite Sam, my brain blows up, and I go home and I'm nuts, I'm psycho. And I sit down, I do the 10th step. I'm resentful at her for saying, the defects of character. I'm saying, so I didn't help you, right? I work a crappy program. I couldn't possibly have saved your life. Thank God I said this to myself, right? And when the dust cleared and I got right with God and I got right with my sponsor, what came out in the wash? She was wrong. She was wrong. My life was being illumined by a source beyond my comprehension. That I could ask God to lift my cigarette smoking, to lift my eating, to lift whatever I wanted, and if it didn't happen, I didn't have to drink. One had absolutely nothing to do with the other. I quoted this the other night. It's one of the greatest things I've ever heard. I heard a guy say the line that it's all the same disease was started by a recovery home that only had one van, which I love that. So you know what? I asked God to take away the cigarettes, and my God said, work the program. I took a service commitment, and I got relieved of it. So I'm 10 years sober, and I'm over 300 pounds, and I'm talking all over the place, and I'm writing. I'm writing like a maniac. I'm resentful at Scott for being fat, affects my self-esteem, pocketbook, ambition, personal relations, and sex. What are the defects of character that if God would remove the resentment would be gone? I'm a glutton. No, don't fight me on this. I'm a glutton. I'm self-serving. I'm not letting anybody feed me. I'm taking care of the whole thing. I'm not letting anything else nourish me. Not my wife, not my career, not my art, not my God. I'm taking that. Okay? Low self-esteem. Stubborn. I keep doing the same thing over and over again. People-pleasing. Mind-reading. I think everybody's thinking about my weight. You guys don't even have time to think about anything but yourself, by and large. I mean, I know I have precious little time besides me. And I write it, I read it, I go out and have a pie and a bowl of spaghetti. What's wrong? What's wrong? I'm writing it, I'm reading it, I'm doing it. Writing, reading, doing. My sponsor said, you know what, you're going to have to go back to the first 5 propositions in the book. Remember when we talked about 6 and 7 before? You're going to have to go to the first 5 propositions in the book. You're not doing this successfully. What does the book say? In the section in Section 7, it says, we go over the first 5 propositions, and we say, am I ready? Have I properly worked the first 5 propositions? And now I can say, in this area, in this specific area, what am I leaving out? Where's the chink in the armor? Is it step 1? Am I not really admitting I'm powerless over food and my life is unmanageable in this area? Is it step 2? Do I not believe that God can restore me to sanity in this area? Father, I know you can keep Saturn on its axis, but you can't order lunch for me. Is it step 3? Am I not really asking for the removal of this? What does it say on the bottom of, I believe it's 62 actually. He's the agent. He's the director. He's the father. I'm going to be the kid. I'm going to take that direction from him. Like the section on step 11. I'm going to ask for an intuitive thought. I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a breath. I'd ask for help, but my mouth's full. Or is it step 4? Do I actually have to do more inventory? What does it say in step 5? It says the newcomer has kept facts about themselves, which later made the whole thing collapse. So have I not admitted everything? So I take the first 5 propositions of the book, and I apply it to the specific problem that keeps recurring over and over and over again to me. If it's sex, if it's smoking, if it's my weight, whatever it is. And my program started becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. My enjoyment and my pleasure and the delight I was taking in those first 3 steps, my appreciation of them became broader and broader and broader. Because 10, with these nagging problems particularly, I once heard someone say that God seems to use what we want most to rope us in, kept sending me back to the first 5 propositions in the book. And again, it's all got to be utilized through 12. All got to be utilized through 12. Otherwise, it's a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. I'm breaking the deal of the 3rd step. Take away my difficulties, the victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And great stuff started happening for me. So I'd say, Father, the last question on page 69. The right answers will come if I want them. What should I do? So I would like to go to OA. No. What should I do? And I kept on asking, and the message to me was to go to Overeaters Anonymous. And I kept saying, no. So finally, I'm now up past 300. I'm now in that state. I'm becoming further and further away from my wife. I'm becoming more and more afraid in my relationship with my kids because I don't feel like I'm really going to be around very long. And it's affecting me at work, really impacting me at work. So I go to Overeaters Anonymous, which made my first AA meeting look like Studio 54. Now I am in the mahjong game of my deepest nightmare. I am now... And was it really like that? No, it wasn't. But this is my perception. I'm dead. It's over. It's done. And I go there with so much spiritual pride. So I was putrid. I'm a circuit speaker. Yes, and a very fat circuit speaker, by the way. But thanks. We're very glad you're here. Would you like me to speak? No. And if you take a look, it's a very powerful chapter, the chapter on step 2 in the 12 and 12. Very, very powerful. And so applicable to the repetition of problems through step 10. What does it say? It talks about clergy coming to AA. And it talks about, and again, our book always says to us, don't fight with them. Don't fight with them. When the clergy comes say, you're a clergyman, you're a smarty pants, you know all about God. God forbid that I should tell you anything about God. I'm not going to say that. But you happen to be yellow in color. You're dying, and you have an enlarged liver. So I'm not going to teach you about God because you can quote the Bible chapter and verse. I can't even touch you on that. But I have a way. All I have is a spiritual tool to bring to bear the grace of God in this drinking problem to break the cycle of spree and remorse. That's all I can teach you. And you're right about everything else. And that's the way I went to OA. I went full of this spiritual pride, and they never fought with me. They said, you're right. Oh, we'll buy your tapes. Oh, we love you. And it wasn't for a long time until I humbled myself. And I want to tell you, man, if I could only orchestrate my own humility, I'd be a much happier guy. I have never been able to orchestrate my own humility. And you know what? I can't understand anything I'm judging. I can't. The minute I start judging something, I don't understand it. I can't appreciate it. It becomes paper mache. It's something less than human. And I didn't understand what I was doing spiritually because I was judging it. And it only was, and it's what Bill said. They've got alcoholism. Alcoholism will school them. Alcoholism, if they stay here, if they continue to not drink, it will make them pliant. And I reached out and I really started getting help. And I really started taking direction. I grew up with a brother who, my brother stopped talking to me sometime before I got sober. And one of the great things I was looking forward to when in my recovery was making amends to my brother and being reunited with him. And I contacted him, and I was just so anxious to try to contact him and become part of his life again. And I made the amends. He wouldn't answer my calls, and I wrote him a letter saying I was sorry. And he sent me back a letter that said, if you lived to be 1 million and you were sorry every day of your life, you wouldn't even come close. And my sponsor, God bless him, said to me, I read it to him. I read him the letter, and my sponsor said, rip it up. Rip it up right now. And I said, why? And he said, because you might reread it. You know, if you're feeling good about yourself, you say, hey, let me get that letter. Let's put an end to this crap right now. You think you're a nice guy? Get the letter. What a kind thing. What a kind thing to tell me to do, and I did it, you know. And I had done my job. I didn't even have to write another resentment about it. I was fine. And then time went on, and then the kids would graduate high school, or the kids would get bar mitzvahed, and I'd get an ouch, and I'd have to sit down and I'd write. And all of a sudden in the defective character list, ungrateful comes up. And why does ungrateful come up? Because, I'll tell you why. If you have this piece of paper, if you go to the second page, it says wake up. Wake up! Somebody and I were talking before about self-centeredness, and she was saying this wonderful thing to me about taking a look at self-centeredness and realizing, what's in it for me? What looks good here? What looks good? Wake up. If I want to change, I must wake up. I have been asleep. I'm seeing this problem in a cloud. I am letting it go below the horizon so that it does not present itself as a real problem. The food problem goes below the horizon. The drink problem goes below the horizon. The sexual problem goes below the horizon. Whole new thing. Bill and the guys couldn't even thought of it. Cybersex, brand new. I remember a couple of years ago, the first time I got to say to a man, he read me a sexual inventory. I said, go home, pray, don't touch your mouse. First time I ever got a chance to say that. It's just amazing how this thing works in every area. No newcomer should have a high-speed connection. None, believe me. When I see it clearly, it will not be precious to me because I'm seeing something of value in here. I keep returning to it. I cannot live this way knowing that this is wrong and continuing to do it. I must tell the truth about what I am doing to myself, to my sponsor, right? I have been willing to complain about it and to go on doing it. I like that lady a lot. I must take it from a complaint to a real piece of business. Make it a real problem. I must stand before it naked, make a surrender, take an inventory, make some kind of demonstration. For me, the demonstration predicated, especially if there's a repeat of examining the first 5 propositions and saying, what do I have to do? Is it step 1? Do I have to admit I'm powerless? How can I demonstrate that? What kind of action will do that? Maybe going to OA will crush my ass up so bad it'll help me really take step 1. Is it step 2? Do I have to expand my prayer life? Do I have to seek other spiritual help? People talk about outside help in AA. And I want to tell you something. If I am going to therapy for a specific problem, if I am listening to spiritual tapes, as a result of my 6th and 7th step, it is not outside help for me. If I am doing anything instead of AA, it's outside help. And so far, thank God for me, in 16 years, I've never done anything instead of AA. It's always been in concert of, and I've done what you guys do. Take a commitment, do the commitment. Hang out with the guy, love the guy. That's the message. But if I'm doing it instead of AA, it is truly, for me, truly outside help, and eventually might even take me outside, way outside. But I have gone to therapy because of 6 and 7. I have gone to other 12-step programs because of 6 and 7. Some people say AA should do it all. I disagree with that. Can AA do it all? Of course. Can AA do it all for that person? Of course. Should it do it all? I think it can and does if you perceive it all as a result of the work. And that's what it's been like for me. And it's been great. It's a kind of freedom and a kind of peace. And I've gone to a therapist. I went to one therapist, Nancy and I went, and the therapist suggested that I go on medication. And I said, you know what? That's actually not what I came here for. And he said, well, I think that if you took the medication and reduced your anxiety, that you would be able to cure the problem. And I said, well, for me, the anxiety is the problem. And if I get rid of that, I'm not going to deal with the problem. And that was the right thing to do for me. I sponsor people who are heavily medicated, who have severe mental problems, who, if they didn't take medication, would be in really bad shape. I tend to not be able to sponsor people who are taking drugs that affect the central nervous system. Valium, Thorazine, those Zine drugs. The other school of drugs, and again, I have absolutely no malpractice insurance at all. So I have no idea what the right or wrong thing is to do. But it's been my experience that people who are taking antipsychotic drugs and drugs that affect the adrenal system, I've had very productive relationships, and this is just me. Again, no indictment of what anything anybody else does. I've sponsored guys who have gotten on medication in sobriety, thank God, and I've sponsored guys who have gotten off everything. You know, so who knows? So, boy, I talked myself into a bubble. Give me a hint. Huh? 10? Thank you. Wake up. Whew. This is not a small deal. I do not want to live like this. I am a grown person. I have been unconscious. I have been slipping into this behavior. I have been acting without explanation. I must ask God to help me keep this thing on a conscious level. I must elevate it in my conscience and see it as a real problem. Prayer is the measure of whether or not I'm in the game. Dear God, direct my will to what you would have me do. And that has been such an incredibly powerful tool for me. And what my sponsor and I have done is try to find new ways to keep the things that are very troublesome to me on a conscious and real level so that I can apply the spiritual principles to them. And my sons were all over my inventory, and I had done some stuff that was just miserable, just really, really bad stuff. I really had injured my sons tremendously. When Micah was 6 months old, I was hungover, and he was laying. He was a 6-month baby. A lot of 6-month-old babies are babies who do a lot of springing with their legs. They can't walk yet. Sometimes they can't crawl, so they spring. And he pushed off my body, threw himself onto the floor, landed face first on a telephone, which was a rotary phone, turned his head, and the hook on the phone slipped right under his eye. And I don't know if I would have reacted to it any differently, but I'll tell you what happened. Instead of carefully seeing what was happening with the baby and looking at him, I picked him up and it ripped the flesh under his eye. Now, the reason why I say that to you is because I never thought I was going to get over this as long as I lived. I didn't tell anybody what had happened. I took him to the hospital, and blood was streaming down his face, and my wife was there, and I said he fell off the bed and he cut his eye. Now, would it have happened if I wasn't hungover, if I was just napping, as parents do? It could have been. Could have happened. Would I have made that mistake in terms of picking him up had I not been hungover? Possible. Possible. But that's not what happened. What happened was I was hungover. I was the drunken, worthless piece of crap dad. That's what happened. And this was going to bore a hole in my head till the day I died. And the doctor said, because then he had to have general anesthetic, 6-month-old baby, got to put the IV in his foot, and they had to, because they got to knock the baby out because baby can't sit still for stitches. To me, it might have to you. You might have looked at my son and saw absolutely nothing. I saw a scar. I saw a scar as plainly, and I saw it every day. Every day that I wasn't too drunk to see it, I saw it. And it was just an emblem of my absolute collapse of being a father. Just an absolute piece of crap, I was the source of agony and pain and disfigurement for my children. And this went on my inventory. This went on. I was resentful at myself for hurting Micah. I was resentful. You know what? It happened on my watch. And I wrote about it. I prayed about it. And I want to tell you what happened to me. When my son was 5 years old, Micah, he came to me and he said, "Dad, is there anything such as God?" We were living near this Christian family, and the kid in that family talked about God a lot. And he said, "Is there anything such as God?" And I looked into the eyes of my perfect 5-year-old baby boy, and I said, "No." I said, "No." I told a little baby, in essence, when it's dark at night and you're scared and you can't go to sleep? Tough, because that's all there is. That's really what I told him, in so many words. And I lied to him. It's not true. And I did exactly antithetical to what I thought I was doing. I thought I was giving him the real deal, the real existential deal, what every 5-year-old needs, the real existential deal. They crave that. That's why Fisher-Price has so much existential toys on the market, right? Schmuck. I thought I was giving him the real deal, saving him so he wouldn't have to be played like a sap and a sucker like those people out there. And what the Big Book of AA says, and if you're new here, please read the 4th chapter of our book, because it talks about it so much more eloquently than I'll ever be able to. It says this is the weakest, mushiest, most pathetic thinking of all. It is exactly the opposite of that. If you can stand in the presence of all this immutable law and say that there is no rhyme or reason to it, and it says something beautiful, it says you've already got what's necessary for sobriety, you've already got what's necessary for faith. You have been incredibly faithful and had tremendous faith in people, places, and things, in drugs and alcohol and all that stuff. And all we're going to do is put to work this incredible resource you have and turn it with some spiritual tools to having faith. The evidence of your faith will come real to you. When we drew closer to Him, He revealed Himself to me. And that's the 10th step for me. That's how I draw closer to Him, through 10, 11, and 12. And when I first got sober, my first guy sponsor was a guy named Roland. And because I did the 10th step, which made me a good sponsor, and because I worked the 12th step, Roland used to call us every night. Every night, he'd call every single night, and he'd leave a message on my answering machine, and he'd say, "Scott, it's Rolly. I'm sober. I love you. Good night." And he'd hang up. I still sponsor this guy today. And Micah told me 5 years later, when I was 6 years sober, he came to me and he said, Daddy, when I was a little boy, I couldn't fall asleep until I heard Roland's voice on the machine. And once I heard Roland's voice on the machine, I knew it was safe to go to sleep, and I went to sleep. I told him there was no God, and you guys came over the message machine and you tucked him in every night. His relationship with Roland is indescribable. They just adore each other. You don't even know what you're doing when you're doing it. Just like Howard and Sullivan, Just like that guy under the bed. Didn't even know. Roland had no idea. And Micah told me this during a period of time where Roland felt that he had not had any impact on anybody in AA. I said, "Oh, really?" Let me tell you this. And I had all these resentments. I had this thing with Micah's eye, with all of this stuff, and I was just crippled by it, just crushed, just deflated at ego at depth. And I didn't know what to do. And my sponsor just said, do your job in AA. So I start doing the right stuff. I got to do a lot of lame crap. I got to spend some booze bucks to buy him a baseball mitt, and spend some dope dollars to register him in a Little League. I start going to Little League games, flag football games. Lame. I go to my first baseball game, a Little League game. Nancy comes over and sees everyone in the stands and me in the sun, alone, pissed off. Just psycho, going up and down 2 hat sizes in the sun. I'm here, I'm doing my job, I'm here. The kids are thrilled to see me, Mr. Redman's going to blow up. Look. It took me a couple of years for the voices to diminish in volume and number, to go and sit down in the stands with the people, to just be a guy at my sobriety station in the stands. And I did it for a couple of years, and my son Jesse received what I believe is one of the greatest compliments any human being can receive. He was intentionally walked, which, if you're not a baseball fan, it means they're scared of you and they want to get to the weenie behind you. He didn't want to be a geek and jump up and down. You got to be cool, so you just put the bat down, and you got to and trotted up the first baseline. And on the way up the first baseline, he looked at me and just flashed me just a little bit of stuff, just a little bit. It's the old man. You don't want to spoil him. Don't be lame. And I could have missed the whole thing. I could have missed the whole thing by a second and an inch. And I'm not telling you that Jesse got intentionally walked because I'm sober. I tell you, I was at my sobriety station because I'm sober. That's what happened. And I've told enough guys who have been drunk on their kid's birthday again about the day my kid got walked. I got to go into school now, and I got to sit down with the teachers and do the horrible, embarrassing thing and say, my kids are sick. They've been sick because they've been living with me. I've been terribly ill. Can you help us? Not once has anybody ever said, no, we won't help you. Every single time, they say, every single time. If you're new here, you're going to hear a lot of people talking about helping you. If you don't let us help you, you're probably not going to be willing to help anybody else. That's just been my experience. Give us a break. We're pathetic. We need to help you. Let us help you. Please. When Micah was born, we were surrounded by friends and family. I had a ton of phone calls and a lot of flowers. And when Jesse was born, 2 years and 9 months later, nobody came to the hospital. Nobody called us. Jesse went up in an incubator. He was sick. Nancy was alone. So alone that they almost put out a psych alert on her because she was all alone. Nobody came visit. Our family couldn't even come. Nobody could come. It hurt too much to be around us. The ice around our heart had become so thick it had repelled everybody. And a doctor calls me that night. Micah was 2. Jesse was brand new. He says, Mr. Redman, you got to come down here. Your wife is having a breakdown. The baby's sick. I said, look, I can't. My kids, I can't find anybody to watch my 2-year-old son. She said, I tell you what, I'll give you my phone number, and you could take your son, my husband's home. This is a doctor in a huge hospital in L.A. Take your son to my house. My husband will watch so you can come down. And I said, no. There was no way for me to accept her generosity. And now my poor son's stuck in the house with this psycho. I would have done better to take him down and leave him alone in the waiting room with a coloring book. At least he could have gotten away from me for a while, And a couple of years ago, one of the guys I sponsor, and I still sponsor him because I work at 10-Step because he has pissed me off plenty, called me up and he said they were having the second baby. And he said, will you watch my son so we can go down and have the baby? And I got to take care of his kid so he could go down and have his new baby. And Jesse took care of the baby with me. Jesse, who I couldn't go and visit at the hospital, he got to take care of this 2.5-year-old boy with me. and it's Alcoholics Anonymous. So the teachers tested the boys, and they tested special. They needed a lot of help. And I had to continue doing 10 steps because I was still embarrassed. I was embarrassed of what the teachers thought of me, although everybody was very kind to me. And I was also very jealous and very scared when I would go into the school and saw other families that seemed okay. It was very embarrassing to me. I felt just horrible about myself, a lot of resentments against myself. And the teacher said, get him into sports, which we did. We did the flag football thing and all of that stuff. And they said, get him into music, because it'll help with the small motor stuff. So Jesse wanted to play drums. So I went down, I took some booze bucks and spent like $12 on a drum pad. It's a piece of wood with a piece of rubber and 2 sticks. Very simple apparatus. He wanted it. I did the right thing. I went to my home group. I told them I had done the right thing, because I'm supposed to do that. That's what I'm supposed to do. I was really proud of myself. And within 2 weeks, the AA drum set showed up at the house. There were like a lot of burnout drummers in my group at that time, so there were like guys coming over with these Megadeth drums going, dude, and laying them on it. Jesse went up with this drum set. You couldn't see him when he sat behind it. This little tiny voices coming by, and I'm serious, it was humongous. And the same thing happened with Micah and his instruments, keyboards and stuff. And a couple of years ago, my sons played the House of Blues. They played the House of Blues in L.A., and they burnt the dump down. Burn it down. And they played at this packed house. They're playing hip-hop music. The kids are standing elbow to elbow. The place is just flipping out. And there's this group of weeping, middle-aged alcoholics standing over to the side. And like the kids are going, what is with the crying old people? What is that all about? Usually they bring backup singers, but there's these weeping old people who look like they've been around the block a little bit. So that's their AA and Al-Anon aunts and uncles who have been following them around for 16 years. A couple of years ago, my son Micah was babysitting for a couple in the program, and the guy said to him, "What do you think of your father, of hearing your father speak in AA?" And Micah said, "I don't really think anything about it. I'm not a member." And he said, "All I can tell you is that since I'm a very, very little boy, the men and women of Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon have taken very, very good care of me, and never once has any of them demanded that I believe what they believe." What an incredible thing. What an extraordinary compliment. What an amazing testament to attraction rather than promotion. And that was a statement made, that was a compliment to you guys made based on his experience as a member of an AA Al-Anon family. And I will just tell you that it's been a war of attrition for me. That a couple of years ago, I looked at my son's name on my 8-step list. I looked at it, and I crossed him out. I knew I was done. I knew I was done, that I was current, and I could move forward. I will tell you now that when I look at my son's eye, I don't see that scar. I don't. And that was a scar that was never going to go away. And my father was never going to come back into my life. I want to tell a little story about my brother, and then we'll take our last break. This resentment against my brother would come back now and again, especially when milestones would get hit in my kids' lives, because he's missing the whole thing. He's missing the whole thing, you know. And so the defect of ungrateful came up, and I realized that I should be grateful that I don't have to talk to the guy. This is a very troubled guy. It might not be a lot of fun to be talking to him. Plus, it might really be awful for my kids to have to talk to him. He might be just really in bad shape. So I started feeling grateful to not have to talk to him. Then it came back again after, like, the boys graduated high school, things were going on, and I had an incredible spiritual experience with it. I thought this thing, because have you ever seen people in AA, good sponsor, good guy, can't get along? Good gal, good sponsor, don't get along. They're still good gals, good guys, good sponsors, but they don't get along. They're not right for each other. It's not